everybody. Very honored this morning to be interviewing the legendary Jacki Morie, who's a landmark researcher in the area of virtual reality. She is interdisciplinary as well, which really interests me as a cyberpsychologist. And she describes herself as an artist and a scientist. I would like you to welcome Jacki and start off the process by asking you, how did you get into virtual reality research?
I actually got into virtual reality through my artwork. I was making art exhibits that were bigger and bigger, and I wanted people to walk around in them and have an experience. And then I found out about virtual reality, where I could do these things and they wouldn't be physical, so I could make lots of them, and I could allow people to have these really immersive experiences.
Very good. So Jacki actually is involved in incredibly exciting research. She is conducting a project with NASA, and specifically with the Human Behavior Performance Unit. And effectively, tell us a little bit about that.
So this project with NASA is a contract to create a prototype sort of virtual reality set of experiences for astronauts who will be going on these long-duration spaceflight missions like to Mars or asteroids in the future. And they realize that the length of time that they will be isolated in the spaceship may actually cause some psychological problems. Okay. So this division of NASA actually looks at how they can mitigate those psychological problems so that when it's really time for the astronauts to go to Mars, they have a handle on how to keep them healthy.
So you're going to effectively use virtual reality to tackle social isolation or sensory monotony in a virtual in space.
Exactly. So the astronauts will they'll have their other crew members, but that will be sort of the only social interaction that they will have. They won't have real-time communication with Earth, so their friends and family will be kind of asynchronous. They'll have email and other asynchronous ways to stay in touch. Okay. But we'd like to make ways for them to have more immediate communication and more meaningful communication with their friends and family back home. And as you mentioned, the sensory monotony, again, is going to be pretty extreme. In the space station right now, they have the beautiful cupola where they can look down on Earth and they can take photographs of it, but they won't have that going to Mars. So we have to give them other environments so that they don't feel like they're just stuck in that one place for the months on end it will take them to get to Mars.
So how exciting is this to be talking about how virtual reality could be applied on a space shuttle trip to Mars? I'll volunteer to help with that. Have you got an example, something you could show us?
We do have a little clip we could roll that will show you a little bit of the sort of the virtual world ecosystem that we're building, and that's what we call it, because if we roll the clip, I'll talk a little bit over it. So it's being built in a open sim sort of engine, and this is the center of the virtual world ecosystem, what we call the Family Communications Center. And it has lots of areas where we can put things, a post office for messages, a little club where they can watch videos or listen to comedians. It's got a library, a weather room so they can see what the weather's like back on Earth, an art gallery, we can show shows there. There are AI agents that can help them figure out what's new and what to go to, so they can click on something, like that little box in the center there, and an AI agent will come and answer their questions. And as well, we've given them each an avatar. So they have an avatar that represents them in this space. Now, they'll never be in the same time as their friends and family. So friends and family log on, say Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and the crew on the spacecraft would log on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then every night in the wee hours of the morning, we synchronize the two servers so that the other side can see what their counterparts have been doing on the off days. And that way they get to see things, they get to build things for each other. They can even record their avatars doing something, say singing happy birthday, and then when their other side comes in, they can play that back. They could have 6 friends and family avatars singing them happy birthday on their birthday.
That's incredible. In terms of research, my area is cyberpsychology, and in fact, a couple of months ago, I presented to the director of NASA while he was visiting our university in Hawaii. And there's a lot of interest in cyberpsychology, and I think that the applications of almost 50 years of space travel to actually take those learnings and apply them to cyberspace, or how humans interact with cyberspace as an environment, I think there are incredible parallels between the human experience in outer space and the human experience in cyberspace. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And I do believe that how we are living in cyberspace today has many lessons for how astronauts are going to be living in real space, outer space, if you will. So what we learn about how people act and what they can gain from having an avatar representation, that's going to have direct implications for what they're going to be doing when they're out in space, because it is an isolated environment. It can be as rich, I think, as cyberspace if we bring cyberspace along on the trip.
So traditionally, when we're talking about virtual reality, we always get to the point where we talk about the many false dawns for virtual reality. And now with Facebook and purchase of Oculus Rift, do you think that this is virtual reality finally being everything that it can be?
I hope so. Certainly, having been in virtual reality since 1989, I've seen all of these false starts, and I've worked in it pretty consistently, but it had to kind of go back into the labs for a while. And what has happened with Palmer Luckey and Oculus Rift and Facebook buying them is sort of the democratization of virtual reality. So now you have tens of thousands of people looking at virtual reality and thinking about how it can be used and creating new ways to use it and creating new vocabularies, and everybody can be doing this. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It was very rare and isolated, took a lot of money to do research in virtual reality, but now that everybody can look at it, I think we're going to see some amazing things come out of it, and I'm really looking forward to this dawn of the second wave of virtual reality.
So your work with NASA really is, in a clinical, psychological context, is a preventative measure in terms of ensuring that, mental health is robust and that there is resilience during these long trips, which to Mars, I don't know how long it's going to take to fly to Mars, but I suspect it's going to be years.
I think a year and a half, something like that, depending on the launch window. What we're doing in terms of really testing it in a clinical sense is right now we've got it deployed in a Mars habitat in Hawaii. And there are 6 scientists who have agreed to be isolated for 1 solid year in Hawaii.
Wow.
On top of this lava mountain. And they basically have 1,000 square feet that they're all sharing. And they are the first group to go into this kind of isolation study with this virtual world ecosystem. So the last group was in for 8 months, and we have them as a control group, so we know how they reacted at the end of 8 months of isolation, and we'll be able to compare that to this group who will be in for a year, but they will have this other additional way to stay in touch with friends and family and counter the sensory monotony of the habitat.
That's incredible. And your results, will they be made public?
We will definitely put them in a paper 2 or 3. And NASA's going to be very interested in it too. And NASA puts most of their data out there for people.
They do. A fantastic organization. Jacki and I just met, actually, just at this conference, but we have a colleague in common, Skip Rizzo, at the Institute of Creative Technology in California. And Skip has done this incredible work using virtual reality protocols in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. So actually to help with the imaginal exposure piece. So that's a sort of applied e-therapy or VR therapy.
Absolutely.
I've published in this area as well. What do you think of the use of virtual reality in a therapeutic context, almost maybe a stage beyond the preventative, but now into therapy?
It's the way it's been used. In fact, when virtual reality kind of disappeared from the scene, the place that it was really being used, there were two places. One was industry for design work, but the other was therapy. And so Skip has been a pioneer in that. The other thing that I was doing at the Institute for Creative Technologies with Skip was I was looking at virtual worlds as a social gathering place for veterans coming back from these conflicts who didn't want to go get help. So if they could go get help, they'd get Skip's work. And if they wouldn't go in for help, they could log in from home to a virtual world place where we would give them things like mindfulness classes. And that would not damage their career at all. They were anonymous because they came in as an avatar, but they were getting the benefit of these mindfulness classes. And that study, we did a 3-year study on that we'll be publishing the data from soon, but it looked like it was every bit as powerful to take mindfulness classes in the virtual world as it is to take them in the physical world.
I think that the application of virtual reality for post-traumatic stress disorder, and we're talking about veterans and soldiers who come back from conflict regions, but I can actually see a much more popular use across the board for virtual reality as a form of therapy. I mean, for example, we know that analysts in police forces who've been exposed to extreme content online through the course of their work can become traumatized. And very worryingly, there have been recent reports in the Philippines of content moderators who work for social media companies as human filters, effectively taking down extreme content, becoming traumatized. So I really, you think that this might be an excellent platform for industry to step in and to support tech developers who are actually looking at using virtual reality for e-therapy processes.
Right. I think we're going to see a lot of e-therapy uses, and an antidote to that kind of trauma, I think, would be a great thing to be working on.
So what do you think is going to happen next in the world of virtual reality?
I think it's out there for anything to happen. I think we're going to see new forms of storytelling. We're going to see the e-therapy happen. We're going to see ways to use it that we can't even imagine right now. Because one thing that virtual reality does, it can isolate you from this world. And in that way, it gives us a place to go that can be safe and can be healing. So I think that kind of use of virtual reality is something that I'm really looking forward to.
And we were chatting earlier and you were talking about capturing, like we're in Ireland, the island of saints and scholars. We are steeped in history and mythical experiences. And I noticed you're wearing the Celtic sign of infinity, the power of the feminine. It's three spirals. You had some thoughts about capturing mystical entities within virtual reality. Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
So we've got virtual reality. It allows us to digitize things like the graphics and the sound and the haptics and even smell, which is an area that I'm very interested in. But I think there are intangible things out there in the world that we don't know how to digitize yet. The atmosphere of a place, the frequencies, the things that make it special or sacred. And I think this is an area that I'd like to see start, where we learn how to take these more intangible things that are really meaningful to us as human beings and figure out how to get those into a virtual space so that the virtual spaces become even more important to us. As we are going to be living in these digital spaces, I want them to have that essence of humanity and that deep spiritual sense that we should be able to put in them if we just do our homework.
So we've talked about, the positive entities going forward. Are there any things that concern you, any red flags or caveats that you're concerned about in terms of the use of virtual reality in a negative way, or things that we should be aware of, or that parents should be aware of in terms of how their children may interact with virtual reality?
Boy, that's a big open book because we don't really know. We don't know what it's going to, if a child starts putting on head-mounted displays as we know them now and has them on for 10 years, we don't know how that's really going to affect maybe their eyesight or whatever. All those things need to be looked at in terms of how the technology itself, which is still pretty clunky, affects us in our physiology. But I think we're going to move on to other types of devices that will bring virtual reality to our physical self in ways that will go far beyond just having a head mount on. And maybe that's bionic eyes, you know, or contact lenses or something that you wear. There'll be other ways that we are going to be able to access virtual reality. But right now we're in this transition period, so it's a little, you know, lots of questions out there.
I think so, and I mean the same thing from as a cyber psychologist and the impact of emerging technologies on human behavior. You know, there's a great paper talking about the impact of technology on infants, and the paper is called The Good, the Bad, and the Unknown. And I think that we know the potential upsides, we're aware of some of the downsides, but my concern really is the unknown. And I think when you see HMDUs, head-mounted display units, and Oculus Rift moving into contemporary usage, maybe on a wide consumer scale by maybe a social media company, and the thought of children actually not only being psychologically immersed in a space, but actually physically encapsulated in a helmet, I would be very concerned about that from a developmental perspective.
Yeah, we have no idea how it's going to affect us on a developmental. You know, with all those neurons growing in the child's brain, how are they going to grow differently when they have this kind of technology available all the time?
I think if you look at the developing infant, you've got something like, in terms of their visual acuity system, 700 neurons firing a second. Do you really want to put an artificial interface in front of that developmental pathway? I don't think so. But I think the pressure has to come back on the behavioral sciences to actually advise in this sort of transitional period, and not to wait for the longitudinal studies, you know.
Right. We don't have a Dr. Spock for the 21st century. Parents don't have a place to go. Maybe with your book that's coming out, they'll have a place to go. But yes, and it's about balance. I think parents need to know that. It's all about balance and what you give that child.
So where can everybody go to hear about your work at NASA? It's so exciting, and your research.
We have a website. I have a website, and the company that we work with called SIFT has a website as well. We have a booth out on the downtown area, so there's a brochure that has some more information about that work and how we see that work segueing into the private sector.
You have a booth here?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. What's the booth called?
SIFT, S-I-F-T, for Smart Information Flow Technologies, which is the company that we've partnered with to do this NASA work.
Okay, so if anybody in the audience here is as fascinated as I am by NASA and missions to Mars and the use of virtual reality, check out the SIFT stand here in the main auditorium.
I think it's 163.
163. Jackie, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you for listening.